Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, Cesar Espino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, Cesar Espino, and today I have a special guest. His name is Jeffrey Holst. Hey, Jeffrey.
Hey, how you doing today, Cesar?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate that. So before we get started, let me give our listeners and viewers a little bit of your background, and then we can dive into it. So Jeffrey is a recovery attorney, a full-time real estate investor with more than 250 residential units and several commercial properties. He is the co-host of the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, where they mix bourbon, old fashions, and real estate investing. In February, he climbed Mt Kilimanjaro and stood at the highest point in Africa. He's also the co-host and founder of the Last Life Ever podcast, and he is passionate about helping people live the best possible version of their last life ever. Wow, I love that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I want to, one thing that I always ask people is good to see a lot of the things that you have come up to this point, right? And I often like to start with, tell me about your upgrowing. How was it for you as a childhood? Where were you originally from? Because I think that there's a story to be told between that and
sure.
That, right?
Yeah, for sure. My story's been ups and downs like everyone else's, right? Yeah. So I grew up in Michigan, West Michigan. So the opposite side of the state from Detroit. So kind of a, it's this solid middle class working, community, probably even maybe borderline upper middle class. So, I had a lot of benefits as a young child. My parents divorced when I was 15. Well, they separated when I was 15. They divorced when I was like 18. And so we went from my dad's an attorney and we had a pretty good younger childhood, but we went from that to a period of time where we were pretty poor for a little while. And we didn't, I remember my mom was driving around in a car that had a window that was broken. And so she put foam on it to prevent it from leaking. And she was working third shift at a gas station. So we went from actually, having a lot to having a little relatively quickly. And then that's where I grew up. So that's my situation.
Yeah. So is that how you fell into being an attorney, because of your dad?
Yeah, I don't know. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I went to work for a 7-Eleven. I was working third shift for about 6 years, and I was taking classes during the day. And I kept going to school for 3 years to community college. It was a 2-year program. I was in the third year of that program, and I just said, man, I just don't know what I want to do. And there was this history professor that told a story about Michelangelo's Moses, which is a sculpture that Michelangelo did. And sort of a long story. I apologize. I'm going down a rabbit hole here. But so this thing about Moses was that when he finished this sculpture, he had this unveiling in front of the Pope, and he sat there and he wouldn't say anything. And finally, one of his students was like, Master, you need to say something. And he took his chisel and he threw it at the sculpture, and he just screamed a single word. He said, "Move," right? Because he was so into this, he's so passionate about this sculpture. He thought it would just stand up and walk, right? And I remember thinking at the time, I have nothing in my life I'm that passionate about. So I was like, I need to figure this out. So I took a year off from school, and I traveled around Europe with the intent of wandering my way down to Rome to see Moses. And I figured when I got there, it was like my imaginary, Indiana Jones style quest. I'm going to go and find the Moses, and then I'm going to know what I want to do with my life. And so that's what I did. And I went down there. And I found it because, it's in a church and it's not hiding, right? So just go to it.
Yeah.
And I saw it and it was nice, but it didn't really solve what I wanted to do for a living. So I walked outside of this church, and this church is on a hill overlooking the Coliseum. It's called San Pedro in Vincole. And so I'm looking down at the Coliseum, and I'm smoking a cigarette because I was young and dumb. And I said, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I really like seeing old stuff. So I'm just going to figure out how to make some money, and I'll use that money to travel and see old stuff. So I made a little list: the pyramids and Petra, which is in Jordan, and Machu Picchu in Peru. So I just made that list, and then I went, okay, can I do to make money? And the only thing I could think of was be a lawyer, because I remember my dad made money. So I thought, I'll just go do that. And I did, and it was okay. I didn't love it. And I'd probably still be doing it now if not for the crazy pathway of my life. So
yeah. There's two things that come to mind, and I think I want to dive more deeper into this, and it's kind of like finding your purpose, or finding, because I think a lot of people, especially in the younger age, and some people even in the older age, they're still stuck in terms of, what is my purpose, or what should I do? I haven't found myself, right? And so I want to dive more deeper into that. In terms of what do you think are things that we can do from a mindset or from whatever perspective, to be able to start looking and finding that purpose. I like how you created a list, which I think that's also part of visualizing, understanding, if I want to do these things, let me put it out on paper. And then from that, I need to create kind of a game plan, right? And this is what you did here.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
go ahead.
But so the thing about it is I did that list wrong. Like, it's fine. It worked because I went and saw all those things. But that didn't solve my purpose question, right? Like, if you write down a bunch of places you want to go and you make yourself a bucket list, and I'm actually not a very big fan of that bucket list concept. I use a thing now I call a life list. It's things that I want to do and experience, but those aren't goals. That's just like, those are aspirations that I just think would be nice if I do them someday. And I don't really care if I check them off or not. Like, if I do them, that's great. Like, if the opportunity arises to do one of the things on my life list, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
But I don't want to get neurotic about checking them off, because what happens when you start checking the stuff off is you lose the benefit of it, and you do it for the reason to do it. Like, in the intro, you talked about how I just climbed Mt Kilimanjaro, which talk about good timing. I came back in March, right? Like, I was in Africa for the month of February. I left and the world was normal, and I came back and the whole world was shutting down, right? So it was a weird time to be traveling. But the thing is, Kilimanjaro was something I wanted to do for a long time. It was on my life list, and I had an opportunity to do it, and so I did it. Right. But if I hadn't done that and I'd done something else on that list, it would have been fine. When I was starting out and I had this short list of things, and that was like a bucket list, it was just like, I need to do the next one on the list. I need to do the next one on the list. And that's not how you find your purpose. So for me, if people want to find their purpose in life, they need to think a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I think I didn't know what I wanted to do until I didn't have to do anything. And you shouldn't have to wait for that. So like, and we didn't really get into my story, like how I got from law to real estate, because that's a different story. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But when I was about 7 years into real estate investing, I was working for this trucking company, and they were selling to another company, and I got 6 months severance, and I went, I think I'm going to take 6 months off. Right. And then I started thinking, well, what do I want to do with my life? And I was very fortunate because I had these real estate investments that made it so I probably could have taken, a couple of years off and I would have been okay. I mean, it wasn't enough to cover all my expenses, but I could pay my bills and, sort of take time to pause and think about it. And not everyone gets that ability to just take a break and think about what they want to do. It turns out about 2 weeks into not working, I was bored. I don't think I would make a great retired person because of that. I don't work now, in full disclosure. I don't have a job. I work for myself. I podcast and stuff like that. But what I've done is I've found things to do with my time that help people. So for me, I know my purpose is to help people. And I always say to people all the time that everyone has a unique calling. I mean, whatever that is, I don't know. It's different for everyone, but everyone has that. And I believe that we all owe it to ourselves, to our community, to our families, and really to the whole world to live out that purpose. I think it's selfish not to. A lot of people are like, all you do is like, talk to, because I interview people and stuff. They're, oh, you talk to these fun people and you have all this fun and you travel and you post about it. And I mean, it is pretty sweet. I mean, Last Life Ever is really just us living the best version of our life and sharing it with people and like, if you can get paid to like, just have fun, it's an amazing thing, right? Yeah. Like, it's really great. But the thing is, I really believe that that's not selfish of me. It would be selfish of me not to do that because we're helping people. And I think that every person in the world has something to offer, and we have to figure out what that is. And then we have to pursue it completely and entirely. And it's so easy when you're doing something you're passionate about. The problem is most people think, how can I make money? And they go become a lawyer. And I was an okay lawyer. I didn't do bad at it, but I didn't love it and I wasn't passionate about it. So I was never going to be good at it. Good, but not great. And I was never going to be a person that, that woke up in the morning excited to go to work. And if you're not waking up excited to do whatever you're doing, then that's an indication you're not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, like, everyone has days where they wake up and they're like, oh, I don't feel like doing this today. Because, nothing's ever going to be perfect.
Right.
That's another one of my core philosophies, actually. I always say good and bad stuff happens to everyone every day. The trick is just to focus on the positive and minimize the negative.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I love that. And that's actually a good point that you brought up. And for the ones that are listening and watching, that is one way to find your purpose. If you find yourself oftentimes or mostly every day waking up and not feeling like going to that job, or you feel like you have a different type of mood, perhaps that might not be where you need to be. And finding your purpose for some can take time. It can take, months, years, I believe. For some other, they can find it rather quickly, right? At least that's my experience from talking to different people. And so it's really being able to hone in on what is that you want to do long term. And I always talk about, well, what is your highest intention, right? If you were on your deathbed today and you were looking back, the things that you did, would that satisfy you pretty much living this world? And if the answer is yes, then you live your purpose. If the answer is no, that means that you're doing something incorrect or not, not necessarily what you want. You got to change the dynamics of that and start working on the things that do make you happy.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't always know. That's the thing. Like, people don't know what makes them happy. That's why I started, and I sort of got sidetracked. I was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which, for people that don't know, that's essentially a pyramid structure. It's like the top is self-actualization. You just do what you want to do. And the bottom is like, you need to find food. Like, the most important thing in the world is food. If you don't have food, none of the rest of it matters. That's the foundation. And then the next thing is like shelter. And, there's this hierarchy of needs. And when you get to the top couple of points on the hierarchy of needs, that's where you get to figure out what your purpose is. If you don't have food, you're not going to figure your purpose out. You're just not. So for me, I think it's really important to be very strategic about buying back your time. Because if you're trading 5 days of your week so that you can have 2 days off on the weekend, 5 for 2, that's not a good day. It's just not a good deal for you. Or 50 weeks a year to have 2 weeks of vacation. You don't have time in 2 weeks to figure out what you want to do with your life. You need to have more time. So for me, that's why I got into real estate, because I wanted to buy time. I knew that if I had real estate investments, and it doesn't have to be real estate, it could be, like you wrote a book, like if you sell a lot of copies of your book, money comes in regularly for work you've already done. Once you've done that sort of thing and created some kind of residual income, then you're buying time for yourself. And the sooner you can buy time, the better, because once you clear your schedule and you have time, that's when you really have the freedom to figure out what you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do this when you're busy,
right?
But it's hard when you're distracted and you're trying to pay your mortgage and you don't have money, and and then you get out of work and you're tired, and the only thing you really want to do is like watch TV or maybe you go out to the bar and drink with your friends, and all that stuff there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. I do those things still, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is, in the middle of the afternoon, I can be talking to Caesar. It's no big deal. Like, no one can tell me, hey, you can't do this today.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good way to kind of, again, buying back your time, which is one of the things that I tell people that that's probably one of the largest commodities that we have is time, right? I mean, that's something that we cannot buy. It doesn't matter. Like once it's gone, right? So we have to make sure we take care of that time. And I forget who mentioned this, but there was something to the point. There's two ways of making money. You either doing it through somebody else's time, or you're doing it by selling a service during that time that you have, right? So you have to be very careful on how you go about doing that. And everybody has, again, if you love being a lawyer or you love being a doctor, then that's fine. You can do it totally, right?
Sure.
So you can, just you got to find that purpose and make sure that you're happy.
I always tell people this. So like people are like, well, I don't understand if they ask me. So the Last Life Ever podcast, which is super fun, but what people say, well, I don't understand what you mean by last life ever. Well, there's an obvious level, which is you only live once, right? It's a YOLO thing. Yeah. Like last life ever, this is your last chance. You have to do it right this time. There's that. But the other part of it is like, to be an extraordinary person, someone that does something that's beyond ordinary, because that's really what extraordinary means, is extra and then ordinary. So if you want to be an extraordinary person, the trick is to be doing what it is that you love, because not that many people do what they love. Listen, if you love working at 7-Eleven, and I actually kind of did, then go work at a 7-Eleven. The problem is if you make $8-10 an hour working at a 7-Eleven, for most people, that's not enough money to live on. So I could do it now if I wanted. Like I go work at 7-Eleven tomorrow, it'd be fine. Like, because I don't actually need any of it. I could do it for free if I want, right? Yeah. Now I don't do it because I live in Chattanooga and we don't have 7-Elevens here. But if we did have 7-Elevens here, I might actually do it. Now watch, they'll probably open one tomorrow and I'll have to get a job.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about, how did you stumble into real estate investing?
So I've always been interested in real estate. When I was young, my parents had some rentals. So I was exposed to it at a relatively young age. I watched like Carlton Sheets, like No Money Down System when I was 15, the infomercial on television, So I was just always kind of interested in it, but I just didn't do it. I fell into, this is another thing that I think people do way too often, is they go, someday I'm going to do this, right? Someday I'll invest in real estate. And that's where I was. I was always like, someday. It was when I get out of college, when I get more money, when I get my law firm worked out a little bit better. So I'm doing this stuff. I graduated law school in 2006. In 2007 and 8, I started doing bankruptcy work. And, the economy was falling apart. So I was like super busy and making good money. And then I decided to take a little break in the fall, or in the summer of 2008, and go see Machu Picchu, which is that ancient Incan city in Peru. And that was literally the last thing on that list I made, right? I was telling you about the Moses thing. So it was like Petra, pyramids, Machu Picchu. So Machu Picchu was the last one on the list. And I'm 30 years old and I go to Machu Picchu and I'm standing on the top of this hill, looking down at the city. And I'm thinking, man, my life is pretty freaking great. I've seen everything I want to see in life. Right. And I got this law firm and we had a television commercial and I had another attorney working for me. I'm like, this is amazing. Like I'm going to have this perfect life. That's what I'm thinking. I still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Right. Like I really didn't. I'm looking at this Machu Picchu and I didn't feel any different than I did when I was looking at the Colosseum, a decade earlier. I'm looking at it going, I don't know what I want to do. I have no idea. Right. Like, but yeah, whatever. I'll just put some more stuff on my bucket list or something, and I was, so I came down off of the mountain there and I checked my voicemail on a payphone because this is like international cell phone plans. Yeah. And there was a message from the attorney that worked for me saying, hey, I hate to tell you this over the phone like this, but, I've decided I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to start my own place and I'm giving you my 2-week notice. So, and the message was from like 5 days earlier and I wasn't going to be home for like 5 more days. So I was going to have like 2 days when I got back from this vacation to like figure out what I was going to do. And I'm like, whatever, I'll deal with that when I get home. I get home and I have pneumonia. So I'm like super sick. I go to the ER and they give me antibiotics and I'm not getting better. So I'm exhausted. I'm feeling terrible. And I go back to the ER 2 days later and they do some blood tests. And I'm like, okay. And they think I have picked up a parasite actually in the Amazon rainforest because I got this weird lump on my stomach and I'm like bruising really easy. And I'm just going downhill really fast. And that was a Saturday morning. Saturday night at 10 o'clock, this doctor calls me on my wife's cell phone because my phone was dead and says, there's just no easy way to tell you this, but you have leukemia and you have to come to the hospital right now. Now talk about so if you think about this, 2 weeks earlier, I'm literally on the top of the world, right? Yeah. My law firm's going great. I've seen everything I want to see in the world. And 2 weeks later, I'm dying in the hospital, and my law firm's falling apart because now I can't work and I don't have another attorney either. So I have 0 attorneys working at my law firm. It was bad. I mean, it went right down, right to the bottom fast. And that even wasn't the worst thing that happened. Because of the financial stuff at the law firm, I ended up piling up a huge amount of debt and was forced into bankruptcy. So I was a bankruptcy attorney who filed personal bankruptcy. And so that was probably the bottom, but that stuff is probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because that's what got me to go, you know what? I can't wait for someday. I have to do it now. Because one, I'm probably going to die. I mean, for a couple of months, probably 6 months, we thought I wasn't going to make it. Fortunately, I did. But I was like, my wife needs money. I mean, she needs income when I'm gone, and she can't rely on my law school to do that, right? Because if I'm dead, I'm dead. There's no law money coming in. And so I was like, I got to figure this out. And so I went and took a job at the trucking company. I moved to Chattanooga. So I got better benefits, which was really important to me at that point. I wanted good insurance. And I started taking all the money I could and investing, and I was highly motivated to buy back my time because I didn't think I had that much time left. For the first 4 or 5 years, I was constantly in this, any day now I'm going to get bad news mode. Yeah. Now I'm it's been a decade, right? 12 years actually since I was diagnosed now. And I feel more comfortable that bad news isn't coming, but I take chemotherapy every day. Wow. To this day, every day I take a pill. It's a 1-a-day chemotherapy pill. It keeps it under control, but there's no way to know when it's going to stop working or if it's going to stop working. And frankly, the disease that I have, it's called chronic myelogenous leukemia, was a death sentence in 2005. If I had been diagnosed a few years earlier, it was there were 5-year survival rate was single digits. Wow. Now it's much higher because of this. So I consider it a miracle drug that came out, between those dates. But they don't know. I've been on it almost as long as anyone in the world because it didn't exist much before I started taking the stuff. And so who knows? What are the long-term side effects? Is it going to blow out my liver? Am I going to, is it going to stop working at year 12? I don't know. There's no way to know. And that uncertainty creates clarity. And I know that seems, I know that seems ironic, but the reality is it's clarifying. It makes me realize that my time is really, really, really important, and I need to make the best possible use of my time. And that, if people get nothing else from this talk, this interview, that's the thing. You don't have to get leukemia to realize that your time is important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you know what? You have a really good point with that. At the end of the day, going back to someday never comes if you keep living on that someday. And going back to that, you don't have to have leukemia or any other, terminal disease to say, you know what, now I got to make a change. Make a change now, because again, you just never know, right? I mean, you could be the most healthiest person and you're driving down the street and you get into a very fatal car accident again. Yeah. So you don't have to be sick at that point. I mean, so you got to just be able to do whatever you can now. And stop worrying about someday when I do this or do that. I say start today, even with whatever you have, even if it's a little bit, just take action, right? How do you do it though? Because I think that another part of that is going through what you went through, right? Is you went from really having everything to literally dropping to nothing to now having this leukemia that you're living with mentally and emotionally. The mind, how do you deal with that? Because I think that sometimes we as people tend to really allow our thoughts to take the best out of us, right? There's about 60,000 thoughts on a day-to-day basis that are going through our head. Out of those 60,000, 85% of them are negative and 90% of them are from before, right? Repetitive thoughts. And so it's definitely not an easy thing to manage. So how do you do it? to be able
So
to stay there.
I don't know if you'll believe me if I tell you this, actually, because I've been circuitous in my storytelling today. I don't have bad days. I haven't had a bad day since I was 17. Now I know I just told you about getting leukemia and going bankrupt, but the thing is, I relentlessly refuse to have bad days, and it's something that happened. I wish I could say there was like some thing that changed, magic like trick or something, but it's a little bit of positive self-affirmation, just constantly reminding myself how fortunate I am, right? A little bit of like when you go to the gym enough, it becomes easier over time. It's a little bit of that, because when you first start this plan, it doesn't work as well. But what I did is when I was 17, I've never actually said this on a show, but I'm just going to tell you, why not? So I think I was suicidal. I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine it now because it's 25 years later.
Right.
But like, I remember I went into the bathroom with a knife. Right. And like, so that seems suicidal, right? Like it might have been definitely a cry for help or whatever. I mean, it's so foreign to me now. It doesn't even seem like me, but I remember I was in the bathroom with this knife and I had it on my wrist, and it was like, it had a serrated blade, by the way. That's a terrible way to try to cut your wrist. It's very painful. So I had this knife and I'm like, this is dumb. Like, and then we were going through, this is in the middle of my parents' divorce, and, I broke up with my girlfriend, whatever, stupid stuff in retrospect, right? I mean, but stuff that was overwhelming at the time for me. And I was looking in the mirror, and first of all, it hurt. I'm like, it should cut my arm, and it hurt. And I was like, that sucks. I don't want to do that. It hurts, right? And I was like looking in the mirror, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm young and healthy, and I live in America. It can't be that bad. Like, so I'm just going to have a good day today, and I'm going to worry about this stuff later. And so I walked out of the bathroom and I said to myself, today's a good day. And I said that over and over and over again for weeks and weeks and weeks, just probably like 100, 200 times a day. And one day I walked into a 7-Eleven. This is actually why I started working at 7-Eleven, because it was like an impactful point for me. I walked into the 7-Eleven and the guy behind the counter said to me, how are you doing today? And without even thinking about it, I said, I never have bad days. And then I went, holy crap, I never have bad days, because I suddenly realized it had been months since I had a bad day. And since then, I've just always continued that. So a quarter century, unbroken string of good days. And, people say, well, come on, like, you got diagnosed with leukemia. That had to suck. Well, yeah, it wasn't my favorite minute, right? But I'm not going to let one piece of bad news ruin the whole day. So when I was in the hospital that night, my brother came into the hospital and he said to me, I bet today's a bad day. It was almost like a game for him, right? I'd been 12 years at that point without a bad day. And he's like, oh, I bet today's a bad day. And I was like, no, not really. Like, I got diagnosed at 10 o'clock at night. The first 20 hours of the day were great, right? So on the balance, the day was good. And then the next day, that was a little bit harder, because then I knew I was sick the whole day. And, I was in the hospital and it was shift change. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I was struggling and I was thinking to myself, I don't have bad days. I don't have bad days. I don't have bad days. But when you start thinking about it that way, you're letting the negativity in, right? Because you're fighting it at that point. And I was pretty good at not letting that happen. And then this nurse came in and she looked at me and she says, oh my God, Jeff, I'm so sorry to see you here. And I look up and I recognize her as a childhood babysitter of mine. Right. And I think instantly, oh my God, Shelly, it's so great to see you. I haven't seen you in a decade. And I was so happy and so excited to see her that it made my whole day better. Right. And you say, well, like, that's kind of weird, right? Because, like, why would seeing somebody that was significant in my childhood, but not that significant, right, be more significant to me at that moment than the fact that I'm in the hospital thinking I'm going to die, right? Because at that point, we didn't even know that there was any treatment options, and my white blood cell count was crazy high. But the thing is, I think have you ever heard of the Bader-Meinhof effect or phenomenon?
I have not, no.
So this phenomenon is like, when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere. Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah. Everyone has that. Some people call it the reticular activating system too. I know it, yeah. Like they refer to it that way too, but it's the same thing. It's technically the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. So I think that's how this stuff works. I said earlier, good and bad stuff happens to everyone every day. Well, if you train your subconscious by telling yourself to look for positive constantly, after a while, your subconscious recognizes the stuff you're familiar with. So when I'm in the hospital dying, that was unfamiliar to me. But what was familiar was I really liked my babysitter. Right. And I really liked people, and I was generally a happy person. And so my mind said, here's something happy to latch onto. It wasn't conscious. This was deep rooted subconscious stuff. And it really did make me happy. And, you could say, well, maybe you really had a bad day, maybe you didn't, but it doesn't matter. I felt like I had a good day. Right. And that's how you define it, because perception is everything when it comes to how you feel. Right. A good friend of mine tells a story about it's a hypothetical story. So say you have a friend, Mike, and Mike comes into he's always late, just always late, and you're always on time, and you make plans with Mike and then he's late, and it kind of, after a while, it starts to bug you, like he doesn't respect my time, whatever. And one day you say to Mike, listen, it upsets me when you don't show up on time. You really, like, I'll make plans with you again today, but you have to show up on time. And Mike says, yeah, no problem. I'm definitely going to show up on time. So at 7:00 rolls around. He's supposed to pick you up at your apartment because you're going to go out for drinks or whatever. And he doesn't show up. And at like 7:10, and you're getting pissed at him, and you're upset and you're mad. And then 7:20, you're even more mad. And pretty soon you get pissed off and you just leave and you go out on your own. And then you come home and there's a voicemail on your, answering machine or whatever from another friend going, hey, did you hear what happened to Mike? He's in the hospital. Well, instantly like that, you're not mad at Mike anymore, and you're worried about Mike, right? And then you're thinking, whoa, what if Mike was in a hurry to come see me and he got into an accident and now he's in the hospital and it's my fault? And then you're feeling bad about it, right? Yep. So then you rush to the hospital, you go and talk to Mike, and Mike's fine. It was just a minor accident. He sprained his ankle or whatever. And, but his phone was dead, so he couldn't call and apologize to you. And so now you're feeling this relief, and you're just super happy that Mike's okay, right? But nothing changed. It's all your perception. So if you perceive this stuff positively, it's fine. Doesn't matter. Bad stuff happens. So does good stuff. Focus on the good, minimize the negative.
Yeah.
That's a very long answer to your question, but that's how I look at it.
No, and that's good. And it's interesting how you talk about that story, because I can relate to that. That actually happened to me a couple of months back, where I was waiting for a friend to call me, and kind of like the same story. And it was exactly the same thing you've mentioned, that I got a little bit upset because of that. And then just to come to find out, she had misplaced her phone and had left it at her brother's house. And at the end of the day, she didn't have no way to communicate to me, right? And so it's the perception. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I can see that. I can relate to that. And I can see how I could have changed that frame now. And really think about it, at the end of the day, there was no harm done, right? It was all positive. Yet in my mind, I was seeing the worst of it, right? Which is is what many of us do from time to time.
Yeah, well, and what you were saying about 60,000 thoughts a day, I've never heard that stat, by the way, but that's insane. Yep. But it sounds right to me. And then most of them being negative. I think for most people that's true. For me, it's definitely not true. I know for sure that the majority of my thoughts are positive. It's not to say I never have negative thoughts, because everyone does. But I do think that's true. That's definitely where I was before. And I think you can just sort of gradually become more and more positive over time. It's like I said, working out, go to the gym, work on your mind, read positive things, read, Eckhart Tolle, read the power of now, right? I mean, this is amazing stuff. Listen to me, because I like to talk about this stuff. Come and listen to Caesar, because you have some great stuff on your show about mindset as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about you have here that it's impossible to live the life of their dreams. So this is your message to the listeners. The key to overcome adversity and living an extraordinary life is accepting what you cannot control and focus on what you can. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that's related to what I'm saying, but there's a quote that I think it was in Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod's book. So hopefully I'm right about that and I'm not misquoting someone else. But he said, the moment you accept 100% responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life. And I love that. I try to live that as much as I can, because the truth is, yeah, bad stuff's going to happen to you. It happens to everyone. You can get leukemia. You can get hit by a car. Like if you die, you die. There's nothing you can do about that, right? But as long as you're still breathing, you have a choice of how you react to the stuff that's happening to you. And so for me, the secret to living that better life is to pick where you want to go, point yourself in that direction, and then be willing to pivot and change and juck and shive, all that kind of stuff that you have to do but keeping your eye on the ball, right? Like go for that goal, whatever it is. I think of it like when they launch a rocket to the International Space Station, the hardest part is starting. Right, like you burn up 80% of your fuel getting out of the gravitational pull of the Earth, and then the last 20%, only 4 or 5% of it is actually used getting from wherever you end up to where you want to be. So, like the International Space Station orbits the Earth at about 300 miles above the surface. Getting that first 300 miles burns up 80% of your fuel to get to 300 miles above the surface of the Earth. But if you end up on the opposite side of the Earth, like 12,000 miles away from the International Spaceship Station, once you're up that first 300 miles, that last 12,000 miles burns 4% of the fuel.
Wow.
Because you just don't, it's just about course corrections then. You've already done the hard part. So the thing is, get started as soon as you can, push like crazy to get to your goal. And when you get close, it'll become a lot easier. So that's how I think about it. And then recognize that, if you're trying to get somewhere and something's in your way, you might have to go around it. You might have to go through it. You might have to go under it. You just got to figure that out.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, before I let you go, I have a couple more questions for you. If people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
Well, the best place to find me is actually the Last Life Ever community. So we have a private Facebook group called Last Life Ever. So Last Life Ever. So if you just go and like request admission to that group, then I'm in there all the time. That's easy to find me there. Otherwise, my website, jeffreyholst.com.
Okay, awesome. And then you've given us a lot of great tips. If you can give me one more tip of if people are going through some sort of challenge, whatever that challenge might be, what can they start doing to start overcoming that challenge now?
So I think the trick is knowing where you want to go, right? So you have to, it's like I was saying earlier about keeping the eye on the ball. There's, I don't know if you know Frank McKinney or not, but he's a real estate entrepreneur and author. And he wrote a chapter in a book that I kind of co-worked on with him, where he talked about aspiring versus, just like basically how to stay motivated. Like he's saying, look, motivation to overcome something is really, really hard. If you can't stay motivated forever, right? You just can't. It's not possible. You're going to have days where you have doubts. You're going to have days where you don't want to do it, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is you're trying to overcome. But if you have an aspiration, if you're looking to a role model, someone else that's already done what it is that you want to do, like if you get diagnosed with leukemia, you should follow me on Facebook and see what I'm doing, right? Because like I have some knowledge about that. But there's somebody that's overcome whatever you need to overcome. Find that person and emulate what they're doing. If you aspire to whatever greatness it is that you want, that will motivate you in those times when your regular motivation fails. Yeah. So aspirations, and it doesn't even have to be a real person. Frank said he aspired to be Robin Hood, right? Like he wanted to take from the rich and give to the poor. So his whole life was about aspiring to be Robin Hood. He didn't actually want to steal from the rich though. So what he did is he started building these like $20 million homes and selling them to rich people. And then he took the profit from these houses that he made and he donated it. Well, he created a charity in Haiti where he builds free housing for impoverished people in Haiti. And he's built over, I think it's like 1,500 houses in planned communities with like the whole, I mean, it's amazing stuff, actually. I wish I had his website and I would tell them how to find him, but Frank McKinney's his name. He's not too hard to find.
Okay, awesome. And then the last thing for you is, do you have any morning rituals or any morning habits that you do every day to just help you through your day?
Yeah, I wake up.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. No, sometimes I go through, like I mentioned Miracle Morning, and sometimes I get in a habit of doing that, and I'm always much more productive when I do. So the Miracle Morning Saver stuff is really good. But for me personally, I'm really bad at mornings. And that's negative self-talk, so I should fix that. But I wake up around the same time. I don't set an alarm. I almost always wake up between 7 and 7:30, and then I get a cup of coffee, and then I usually mess around on my phone for like 30 minutes to get myself fully awake, and then I'm just ready to go. Because the thing is, for me, I love what I do, so it's easy to stay motivated to do what I do.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for being here. Anything else that you want to say before I let you go?
No, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome. For the rest of you guys, please do me a favor. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment to this podcast, this interview here, and make sure you leave us your comment. And stay tuned for the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Cesar Espino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.cesarrespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.